You write, while Putin expanded Russia's oil production, expanded natural gas production, and then doubled nuclear energy production to allow more exports of its precious gas, Europe, led by Germany, shut down its nuclear power plants, closed gas fields, and refused to develop more through advanced methods like fracking. So they were going in exactly two opposing directions, and that's how they empowered him, and that's, you posit, that's what he understood and nobody else seemed to when calculating the risks of invading Ukraine.
Yeah, you got it. And you even alluded to something that I haven't even mentioned yet, which is maybe one of the biggest and most important elements of the story, is that you now have the Secretary of State, you have the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary General of NATO, a well-respected French professor at one of their leading universities, basically the equivalent of their MIT in France, all saying that the Russian government financed anti-fracking activism in Europe by climate activists to stop natural gas production in Europe, which would have made the continent less reliant on Russian gas. So they're now, and so, I haven't seen the intelligence directly, but I mean, it would be quite a conspiracy theory for them all to mention it, especially, given that Hillary at the time was trying to tell people that she was, better on climate in the United States. It's around 2014. We also a report that the Russians financed almost $100 million in anti-fracking advocacy in Great Britain, where they have a lot of shale. But there's a lot of shale in Europe, too. I mean, people think it's just in the United States where you can frack. It's not the case. You could do it in Europe. So I think that's pretty wild, where you basically have a story where confirmed at the highest levels of government by people that are quite friendly to action on climate change, saying that climate activists funded by Putin were a big part of making Europe dependent on Putin. Of
shaming Europe out of developing its own, or just continuing the development of its own energy supplies, and instead turning to Vladimir Putin. Right, exactly. And because now you say there are things that they can do. So far, we haven't seen it. Germany has said they're going to shut down Nord Stream 2 permanently. Okay, that's one thing. That's good. But Germany has, you point out in one of these pieces, 6 nuclear power plants, right? They shut down 3 and they're about to shut down the other 3. And it's totally unnecessary. They can help save themselves, maybe not that easily now that they've already pulled the plug on 3 of them. But you tell me how feasible it is for them to rejigger that.
Well, yeah, and I should also say, in the midst of all, there's so many things to talk about. I mean, in the midst of all the chaos, there was also a gun battle between Ukrainian forces and Russian forces at a nuclear plant. So we had like a nuclear scarelet, it was just a minor scare in the history of nuclear scares. And the interesting story, of course, the plants, the reactors that have been operating have kept operating because they want them for electricity. The irony, of course, both sides have an interest in maintaining those nuclear plants. So actually all is all that ended well. Certainly plenty of dangers in that region, but you can see where people are getting killed. It's by, civilian attacks. But yeah, to your point, I mean, nuclear provides this reliable source of energy. So the bottom line is Germany could just burn more coal, or they could do nuclear. And the difference is that the nuclear plants emit basically no carbon emissions, a small amount of very, very, very small amount of carbon emissions in their total life cycle, whereas the coal plants are the dirtiest fossil fuel producing significant amounts of carbon emissions. That's the bottom line. So I think that's the wake-up call. It's that all this stuff about solar panels and wind turbines, they're just not reliable enough. They've spread them over so many distances. They've captured the best wind and sunlight they can. They're just at their physical limit, basically. So yeah, it's not a great situation.
Well, you pointed out when our first interview together, how you once were part of Greenpeace. I mean, you are of the left. You were an activist. You really cared about the environment, about American land, and so on and so forth, and sort of came to these views on what the right place to go was. P.S. It's nuclear. Organically, you worked during the Obama administration on the Solyndra deal. You really you were a true believer, but after testing all these things out and seeing them fail, you came to realize a lot of these renewables are fraught and are worse for the environment than, for example, nuclear, which has gotten a bad rap. And you write in one of your pieces a little bit about this, and it jumped out at me given what we talked about, and people should go back and check out that episode while we're through time. You write, Germany has spent lavishly on weather-dependent renewables, right? So they're going the same way our president's trying to push us right now, to the tune of $36 billion a year. mainly solar panels and industrial wind turbines, same for us. But those have their problems. You write solar panels have to go somewhere, and a solar plant in Europe needs 400 to 800 times more land than natural gas or nuclear plants to make the same amount of power. Then you continue, farmland has to be cut apart to host solar. This is one of your issues, that it's not all about carbon emissions. If you care about the environment, you have to take a serious look at what solar and wind reliance is doing to our land.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I pointed out, I tweeted also yesterday, that nuclear heavy France, or that rather I should say Germany, which is moving away from nuclear, as you noted, it closed 3 reactors at the end of last year, and it's going to close 3 more unless it stops the closure at the end of this year. Germany produces 6 times more carbon emissions per unit of electricity as France. And then everybody says, oh, nuclear is just too expensive or something, and renewables are cheap. Well, if that were the case, then French electricity wouldn't cost 59% of what German electricity costs. So you can see it at continent-wide levels. Look, it's like, and, as for natural gas, particularly if you don't have nuclear, natural gas is the reason that U.S. carbon emissions declined by 22% between the year 2005 and 2020, which was 5 percentage points more than we were supposed to reduce them under the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement. So if you're really concerned about the climate, then you should be in favor of natural gas and nuclear. And thus, we should be suspicious of people who call themselves climate activists, like Greta Thunberg, like Al Gore, like John Kerry, who are constantly either trashing, criticizing, or dismissing the importance of nuclear and natural gas.
And fracking.
Yeah, fracking, because that's how we get the gas out of shale.
Yeah. I mean, these are all things I learned from you. In our first episode, for people who are climate dummies like yours truly, go back and listen to that episode. I'll give you the number in just a minute as my team looks it up, because Michael walks you through it and sort of explains, this is what natural gas is, this is how we get it, this is what we do with oil, and so on and so forth. Very good primer. Yeah, you write Berlin was faced with a choice between unleashing the wrath of Putin on neighboring countries or inviting the wrath of Greta Thunberg. They chose Putin. That's exactly it, right? They allowed, Putin's propaganda machine and Greta Thunberg, who knows nothing about anything, to shame them out of meaningful domestic energy production and got themselves and kind of the rest of us into the position we're in right now, where Putin's got the upper hand and he knows it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge scandal because, look, there's so much noise right now, Megyn, as you see on Twitter, people talking about military action by the United States against Russia. It's just not going to happen. Like, we're 2 nuclear armed powers. Like, forget about it. Anything that gets you close to conflict with another nuclear armed power, you want to avoid. Everybody knows this. School children know that. So that's not going to happen. Similarly, the politicians are not going to want to keep oil prices at super high levels because the public is going to pay for it. We're facing, I don't think people totally understand this yet. We're facing very significant sustained energy prices, which means high food prices. We're also potentially seeing some disruption of wheat production. It doesn't have to be this way, but it could be coming from Ukraine, which is a major global supplier of wheat. It's considered the breadbasket of Europe. So we could be seeing, energy, food, electricity shortages. We could be seeing, it could be a significantly worse situation than the food shortages that triggered Arab Spring. I think it's very clearly the worst energy crisis since 1973. I now see other people are saying that as well. So, and people suffer when you don't have reliable sources of energy. So I think it says something about the potential decay of our civilization and really the decline of the West, that it really allowed itself to indulge in this kind of, frankly, pretty decadent secular religion, where it imagined that we were all going to become part of nature with renewables, even though they were, solar panels are made by enslaved Uyghur Muslims in Chinese factories using coal. It's like one of the worst, processes for humans. I'm a little bit, I feel a little upset too, because you kind of see all the concern for the Ukrainians. And of course, I do too. I also feel it for the Africans who have, people in the Congo who have suffered significantly producing the minerals for renewables. Also for the Muslims in China who have been producing these solar panels. So you kind of go, what are we what was this about? It was about a kind of delusion, and it was one that was actively harmful in many situations to people and also harmful to natural environments, while at the same time strengthening Putin and making it so that really there was no consequence for him in invading Ukraine. I mean, there's some, I know right now, some sanctions. I don't want to overstate it. I support the resistance movement, but I just think we got ourselves in a situation where, like, to punish Putin is really punishing ourselves.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.